LeBron James makes me fucking sick. Walks around calling himself the GOAT. He ain't no fucking GOAT. The guy travels more than Anthony Bourdain. Rest in peace. Yeah. And now this fucking woke communist cocksucker wants to go over there to that fucking shithole country of France, where they don't like to bathe regularly. They just cover it up with perfume and deodorant and whatnot. And this might shock you, but even as a LaVeyan Satanist, what they did replacing the Last Supper with a bunch of a bunch of trans testicles, that was absolutely nauseating. But what's even more nauseating than that is that not only does that punk motherfucker LeBron James not stand for the national anthem in America, but he goes to another country as an American and doesn't stand for the national anthem. How about you just take your money and get the fuck out of America, LeBron James? How about that shit? I'm done. We are 2 hours and 6 minutes and 1 second in, folks. Approaching the finish line. Number 15. Live television.
About them, but look at it all with a huge grain of salt because of the insane. You can't even embrace them by calling them conspiracy theories. So he's an important part of the case, but we can't really believe on face value a lot of what he said. And that's the crucial factor that is almost always ignored. Why would these people leave him alive after so brutally slaughtering everyone at the place? Also, how much did Rudy Altobelli, the owner of the house, who also had mafia connections and who Manson had far greater dealings with than was ever previously known, how much did he know about the nature of the crime? These are important questions that I go much deeper in the Manson file, but there's things for the casual listener to begin to realize. The reason you don't know what this is all about is because you need to look deeply into the lives of these obscure personalities on the fringes of the case who should be better known, if you can see the pattern forming there.
Manson idolized the Beatles. He thought they were prophets, and they were sending out messages beneath the lyrics of their songs, not only to him, but to other tuned people.
I'm sorry to interrupt, folks. I just wanted to let the tape roll. But I just have to point out the voice you're now listening to is the voice of a charlatan, an absolute cocksucker, a grade A piece of shit, if there ever was one. Vincent Bugliosi. The guy made it all up. He made it all up. And then he wrote the best-selling true crime book of all time. Fuck Vincent Bugliosi. Fuck him. Fuck him. I'm done.
The Beatles came out with this album, I think they called it the White Album. It was all white. So Manson gets a hold of the album, and he comes back to the ranch, and he's all excited. And he tells the members of his family, the Beatles are telling it like it is. Helter Skelter's coming down. Helter Skelter to Manson meant the last final destructive war among men on the face of this earth. He called it Helter Skelter. There's another song on that album that they played quite a bit, Blackbird. And there's a verse in the song Blackbird about blackbirds fixing their wings, rising up and flying. So Manson told his family that by Blackbird, come on, we know what the Beatles are talking about. They're talking about the black man. And they're telling the black man to rise up against the white man. There's another song in that White Album called Piggies. To Manson, piggies were the white establishment. And the Beatles are saying in Piggies that the piggies deserve a damn good whacking. Showing you the connection between these songs and these murders. Certainly Helter Skelter was his primary motive. And the Killers, that was their only motive, to follow Manson and start Helter Skelter. Manson had two other supplementary motives, one of which was this extreme hostility towards society. I don't think there's any question that on these two nights of murders, he was viciously striking out at the establishment, particularly to that Tate residence where he had been booted off the premises. He didn't know who the victims were, but he sensed they were members of the entertainment industry, and he was striking out at the establishment. And then a third motive was his passion and his lust for death, blood, and murder. Talked about it all the time.
What did you think of Manson when that happened?
I don't know what I thought when it happened. I just think a lot of the things he says are true. That he's a child of the state, made by us. Right. And he took their children in when nobody else would, is what he did. But of course he's cracked, all right.
But what was your feelings when he said, well, it was Helter Skelter?
Well, he's balmy. He's like any other Beatle kind of fan who reads mysticism into it. I mean, we used to have a laugh putting this, that, or the other in a light-hearted way that some intellectual would read as some symbolic youth generation what's it. But we also took seriously some parts of the role, you know. But, I mean, I don't know, what's Helter Skelter got to do with knifing somebody? You know, I've never listened to the words properly of Helter Skelter. It was just a noise, you know.
That was prosecuting attorney Vincent Bugliosi, the author of Helter Skelter and the perpetuator of the Helter Skelter myth. You just heard him explain that myth. Now, you also heard John Lennon's response when asked what he thought of Charles Manson and his supposed use of Helter Skelter. Now, I get a feeling that Lennon didn't really buy the myth, but that's just my view. Bugliosi is interesting to me, however, in that he was heavily chided by researchers for his faulty work on the JFK assassination, yet many researchers have never questioned his work on Manson. So what I want to ask you, Nicholas, is why do you think Vincent Bugliosi stayed firm on his story until the day he died, and why do you think he wasn't challenged?
Well, when I began researching the book, I just, in the 80s, I think maybe I need to back up a little bit about how I even began researching it when you asked me, but that gets into Bugliosi. When I contacted Manson in 1985, it was again to do this musical recording. That was our original plan. And then a book called Manson in His Own Words by Newell Emmons was just about to come out. And Newell Emmons was a criminal associate of Manson who did him a favor earlier in his career before his notoriety. And as a payback, Manson let him write the exclusive autobiography of him, ghostwrite it, so to speak. To make a long story short, Manson was extremely dissatisfied with what Newell Emmons published as Manson in His Own Words, as he felt it had totally not presented his points of view and had even included fictional statements, which are very complicated, and again, I can't get into. So he said to me, could you put together a book that would have my real words? Can you put together something that will... He was so angry at Manson in His Own Words, he wanted a sort of alternative counter version of that. So with his cooperation, I put together the first edition of the Manson file, which was very different, the 1988 edition, from the 2011 and the forthcoming new edition of it, because it was basically a compilation of Manson's own philosophy and music, which was practically unknown at that time. Only then, after that book was published, did I really start to understand through conversations with Manson the degree to which the case Bugliosi presented had nothing to do with reality. It took a few years of casual conversations with Manson for myself to even fully understand the extent of the deception. So then, when the Manson file came out, and when before the film Charles Manson Superstar was made, through a lawyer in Beverly Hills who had the entire transcript of the court proceedings, which at that time was not publicly available, but he had been researching the case, and he believed that Bugliosi should not even be allowed to be a lawyer. He believed that this was complete malfeasance, that witnesses had been coached, people had been paid off, that in no way was that a fair trial. And many other people in the legal community, as you said, were extremely suspicious of Bugliosi. When I read the trial transcripts, I saw the extent of how incredibly flimsy the case actually is. And you don't really realize what an insubstantial case it is. It is based completely on the hearsay of Linda Kasabian, who is basically allowed to have her freedom and her life rather than being sentenced to death for telling the story that Bugliosi wants her to tell. It's an incredibly flimsy case if you really look at it. If you get away from the self-aggrandizing book that Bugliosi was already preparing to write even when he took the case on, because he wrote the book Helter Skelter, as I said in my own book, as a way of establishing his credentials to try to become the Attorney General of California. It was a political ambition, and he wanted to paint himself as a hero. So when I read the transcripts, I couldn't believe just how fantastic the idiotic case really was, when you really see every detail of it. And only now are other people, as it's slowly becoming public, starting to see what, an absurd prosecution that was. Secondly, a lot of people don't realize, when they consider, as many people still do, that Bugliosi was a brilliant legal mind and a great prosecutor, no defense was put on. Do you realize that the prosecution ended its presentation of its case and the defense rested? So there was no defense. There was nothing else that was going to happen but that Bugliosi's prosecution was victorious. See, a lot of people they think there was a defense. There was none. Based on that, me and a few other associates actually began getting a legal fund together to get a new trial for Manson. The whole saga of that could be a whole other encyclopedia, so I'll skip the details. But in the process of that, I understood exactly to what degree Bugliosi lied, concocted, airbrushed out important details